Right now, beneath the concrete of downtown El Paso, transnational cartels aren't just smuggling goods in the dead of night. They are actively engineering subterranean logistics networks right through pre-existing city storm drains.
It is truly staggering. You are looking at a level of urban integration that, well, it completely rewrites how we think about national borders and infrastructure.
Exactly. Welcome to a special edition of our Deep Dive. Today is July 24th, 2026, and we are unpacking the Stylo News Intel update, specifically the Western Hemisphere Situation Report.
Right. And to give you some background on how we're bringing you this information today, this deep dive is sponsored by ProWave AI and is generated entirely by Stylo News.
Which is actually a massive advantage for you listening right now. You see, Stylo News is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Off software, which is a platform specifically designed for enterprise operations.
Yeah, we are talking about tools used by government, military, and corporate decision makers. So today, you're getting exclusive intelligence-grade access to monitor these global flashpoints.
You are looking at the geopolitical board exactly as the analysts do. So what is our mission for today's brief?
Our objective is to analyze the strategic situation, the active conflict zones, and the shifting political landscapes across the U.S. border, Central America, and South America over the past 2 weeks.
We'll be identifying key decision makers and looking at the social media sentiment that's currently shaping public narratives, just to identify what's most likely to happen next so you know what to watch for.
But before we get into the data, we do need to set a clear baseline regarding the nature of the intelligence we are reviewing today. The sources contain highly politically charged content.
That's a crucial point.
Right, because this intelligence involves actions and statements from both right-wing and left-wing actors, as well as extreme sentiments from social media. So as presenters, we maintain strict neutrality.
Yeah, we don't endorse any side, course of action, or political viewpoint. We are just here to present the facts and outline the different perspectives.
Exactly. Our goal is to give you a clear-eyed, unbiased view of the situation on the ground without generating unnecessary fear. We are simply unpacking the mechanics of what is happening.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to begin at the northernmost friction point in this hemisphere, which is the United States southern border.
Because recently, Washington policy has been colliding directly with the ingenuity of these transnational cartels, and the tactical environment shifted dramatically right in the middle of July.
Yeah, to understand the hemisphere's illicit flows, we absolutely must start here. The border dictates the logistics for the entire network extending south.
Right. On July 16th, U.S. President Donald Trump took decisive action by officially designating the Juarez cartel and Las Viegras as foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs.
Wait, I want to pause right there. Because an FTO designation, it sounds like just a bureaucratic label, but looking at the briefings, it fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement, doesn't it?
Oh, it changes the entire paradigm. It is not merely a label. When a group is designated as an FTO, it shifts the response from a purely law enforcement framework into a national security and military framework.
Right, so instead of DEA agents needing warrants and cooperating with local police, you're unlocking Treasury Department sanctions to freeze assets globally.
Exactly. You can utilize military intelligence assets, like advanced drone surveillance and signal intercepts that are typically reserved for overseas combat zones.
And the reports also highlight the authorization of NSPM-7. For those of us not deep in national security presidential memorandums, what does invoking NSPM-7 actually allow them to do?
Well, NSPM-7 is a directive aimed at preemptively targeting what the administration perceives as left-wing threats to national security. In practice, it shifts the operational posture from reactive to preemptive.
Meaning they aren't waiting for a crime to happen.
Exactly. It allows agencies to allocate resources to dismantle networks before they fully materialize, which blurs the lines between domestic law enforcement and international intelligence gathering.
Which creates an immediate, massive ripple effect across the border into Mexico. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is now caught in a highly complex bind.
She really is. On one hand, she has to protect Mexican sovereignty. You can't just allow unilateral external military incursions from the U.S. without massive domestic political fallout.
But on the other hand, she is facing immense pressure from Washington to cooperate against organized crime, all while dealing with internal corruption.
It is a precarious diplomatic tightrope. And while the policy shifts in the capitals, the reality on the ground adapts instantly. The border itself is not a static line on a map.
No, it's a highly adaptive, constantly shifting logistical ecosystem. You might look at an FTO designation as just Washington paperwork, but if you live in a border state, this changes your local infrastructure overnight.
We see that in the physical crossing flashpoints. The data highlights specific areas under severe pressure right now. San Luis, Arizona, the sprawling corridors of the Tono O'odham Nation, and Campo, California.
But here is where it gets really interesting. Going back to our opening point, Fox News reporting details that cartels are now heavily utilizing underground storm drains and tunnel systems right in the middle of El Paso.
Which demonstrates a staggering level of logistical maturity. They are not just crossing open desert anymore. They're exploiting the pre-existing engineered infrastructure of an American city.
Yeah, I have to push back a little on how we categorize this in the briefing, though. I mean, if cartels are actively engineering subterranean tunnel systems beneath El Paso, are we moving past simple smuggling?
How do you mean?
Well, this feels like it's starting to resemble urban warfare logistics. You have to deal with ventilation, lighting, avoiding city maintenance workers. That is a massive operation.
I wouldn't classify it as urban warfare just yet, simply because their primary objective remains evasion, rather than holding territory or engaging in direct combat. However, I concede your point regarding their operational sophistication.
It takes serious resources.
It does. To route personnel and material beneath the concrete of a modern city requires advanced engineering, sustained financing, and airtight operational security. It complicates physical enforcement exponentially.
So if the U.S. military effectively seals off the Texas border with this new FTO designation that bottlenecks the supply chain, where does all that pressure go?
It forces a massive rerouting down south. That transitions our focus to the Central American corridor, which has long served as the main logistical highway.
But right now, the primary intelligence indicates a significant shift in how that architecture is being utilized. I was actually shocked looking at this specific report from July 21.
The land route.
Yeah, it reveals that the Sinaloa cartel is actively opening an entirely new land cocaine corridor right along the Guatemala-Honduras border.
Which is fascinating because for years the focus has been heavily on maritime route submersibles, go-fast boats zipping up the Pacific or through the Caribbean.
Right, so this pivot to a grueling overland route through the jungle signals a major strategic adaptation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a classic response to enforcement pressure. We reviewed a report from Breaking Defense that characterized the long-running U.S. military anti-drug campaign as effectively a failure.
A failure because state militaries are rigid while cartel networks are fluid. It's like trying to dam a river with a chain-link fence. The flow just finds the path of least resistance.
Exactly. They're carving an entirely new channel through the Guatemalan jungle. But opening a land route isn't easy. You have to systematically pay off or intimidate local officials all along that border.
Which degrades the local security environment drastically. And the human cost of this transit network is severe. We are tracking Honduras right now as a major flashpoint.
Specifically, Guanaja in the Bay Islands has been identified as a critical maritime hub for goods moving north before they hit that new land corridor.
And it's not just illicit goods flowing through. The threat to U.S. personnel in the region is becoming acute. The briefings specifically cite the recent murders of 2 Americans in Honduras linked to cartel activity.
Which is a very alarming indicator. Historically, cartels generally prefer to avoid direct confrontation with U.S. citizens to prevent drawing targeted military attention.
Especially the kind of attention that comes with an FTO designation.
Right. So the fact that these murders occurred indicates that the sheer volume of illicit activity in Honduras is creating a highly permissive, chaotic environment where the local rule of law has entirely eroded.
So, following the river upstream to the source, we have to look at South America. The physical trafficking routes we've been tracking are currently being shaped by massive political realignments.
And then absolutely devastating natural disasters.
Sure.
The environment in South America right now is highly volatile. We are observing a distinct regional political shift to the right.
And the data indicates this is heavily driven by public exhaustion, right? Populations are tired of crime and cartel violence, and they're demanding harder-line, militarized approaches.
We see this clearly in Colombia. President-elect Abelardo de la Espriella is officially opening an office for the Shield of the Americas Alliance in Medellin.
That is a massive shift. It is a direct alignment with Washington's current anti-narcotics policies, totally moving away from the previous administration's attempts at negotiating with armed groups.
And Peru is echoing this exact same rightward enforcement-heavy shift. Peruvian authorities recently captured 2 key Colombian narcotics operatives, Jimmy Moreno and Jorge Cano.
What's fascinating here is how domestic security policy is overriding all other political concerns. The electorate in these nations is prioritizing immediate physical safety over broader economic ideologies.
They want tangible results against transnational crime, but while this political realignment is happening, the region is also dealing with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, that brings us to Venezuela. The scale of the destruction there is staggering. On June 24, twin earthquakes measuring 7.2 and 7.5 in magnitude struck the coastal region of La Guaira.
The reports confirm over 5,000 dead and 20,000 displaced into overcrowded camps. A natural disaster of that magnitude instantly alters the geopolitical priorities of a nation.
Right, it forces a pause on standard operations. Interim President Delcy Rodriguez has managed to secure $346 million from the International Monetary Fund for urgent reconstruction.
Which, if you follow Venezuelan politics, is highly notable. It marks a tentative resumption of relations with international financial institutions after years of strict economic isolation.
But the geopolitical machinations don't stop just because the ground is shaking. Concurrently, U.S.-backed negotiations for a democratic transition in Venezuela are scheduled to begin on August 1st.
Yes, and these talks are being aggressively supported by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Venezuelan opposition leader Dinora Figuera.
I mean, it's like trying to negotiate the blueprint for a new house, while the ground beneath you is literally and politically still shaking.
That is a very apt analogy. You have an interim leadership trying to manage international aid, clear tons of rubble, and simultaneously negotiate the entire future governance of the state.
Against an opposition backed by Washington. It requires a tremendous balancing act, and it leaves the country highly vulnerable to exploitation by those very illicit networks we were just discussing.
Absolutely, because those networks thrive in areas with degraded state infrastructure and distracted security forces. Which brings up a critical question. How is all this landing with the public?
We're transitioning from the physical realities on the ground to the digital battlefield. The intelligence includes a deep analysis of social media sentiment on the X platform from July 14 through July 17.
And this is where we must reiterate our neutrality. The data we are about to discuss reflects the raw, unfiltered opinions of the public. These opinions are highly polarized and sometimes deeply conspiratorial.
Our job is to report what the data says the public is feeling and how that shapes policy, not to validate those feelings. Looking at the raw numbers, I was actually taken aback by the level of skepticism.
It is overwhelming.
Yeah. You might assume that heavy anti-narcotics operations would draw public support, but a massive portion of users view these U.S. military raids not as legitimate law enforcement, but as pure geopolitical theater.
Many are framing these actions as mere pretexts for U.S. meddling, regime change, or securing regional control over resources. It reveals a profound deficit of trust in official state narratives.
Right. When a government announces a successful raid, a significant portion of the digital public immediately assumes an ulterior motive.
This raises an important question about the long-term effectiveness of security policies if the public fundamentally rejects their legitimacy from day one.
And the data shows it goes even further into extremes. The intelligence highlights pervasive anti-China and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories circulating widely regarding the flows of fentanyl.
Users are actively weaponizing the very real drug crisis to push geopolitical hostilities. Furthermore, we are seeing intense localized alarm.
Yeah. For example, users in Ecuador are expressing deep anxiety and fear over Colombia's radical new bombing and fumigation plans.
Which makes sense mechanically. Ecuadorians are terrified that aerial fumigation chemicals will drift across the border, destroying their crops, and that Colombian bombing campaigns will push armed cartel factions into Ecuador to seek refuge.
However, amidst all this deep public mistrust and fear, the analysts noted isolated pockets of what they call operational optimism.
Specifically, there is distinct public approval regarding successful laboratory raids in the Putumayo region of Colombia. That contrast is vital to understand.
Right. When the public sees a tangible, undeniable disruption of the drug supply at the source, like a physical jungle lab being dismantled, there is approval.
They support the tactical, mechanical victories, but they deeply distrust the broader, abstract strategic intentions of the governments involved.
And this profound polarization in public sentiment is not just a Latin American phenomenon. It is deeply reflected internally within Washington right now, ahead of the November 2026 midterms.
The Democratic Party, in particular, is experiencing a significant ideological and generational fracture. A recent vote saw 103 Democrats, including high-profile figures like Nancy Pelosi, supporting a cut to military aid for Israel.
So why does a vote on Middle Eastern aid matter for the Western Hemisphere? Because it showcases a massive realignment in the U.S. foreign policy consensus.
It shows that domestic political pressures are beginning to fundamentally challenge long-standing international alliances across the board. And we see this pushback directly affecting hemispheric policy as well.
Right. Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin is publicly criticizing hardline State Department reports on Cuba.
Just for some context, the State Department continues to frame groups like the Venceremos Brigade, an organization that brings Americans to Cuba for civilian work projects, as instruments of state subversion.
But Representative Pocan is actively pushing back on that narrative. He views it as civilian diplomacy and is advocating for an end to the blockades and avoiding further military entanglements.
So, what we are observing is a fractured political establishment in Washington trying to project strength across a hemisphere that is rapidly shifting beneath its feet.
It means that formulating a unified strategy to combat agile cartel networks is incredibly difficult when the domestic consensus is actively splintering.
It is an overwhelming amount of data to process.
It really is. So let's briefly recap the key through lines we've uncovered today. We tracked the incredible adaptability of the cartels, starting from storm drains in El Paso down to entirely new overland cocaine corridors through Central America.
We also examined South America's distinct rightward political shift, driven by a demand for militarized security, occurring concurrently with earthquake recovery and diplomatic negotiations in Venezuela.
And finally, we looked at the deep polarization on the digital battlefield, mirroring the ideological divides fracturing U.S. politics.
Looking ahead, the intelligence notes that the October 2026 presidential election in Brazil will be the very next major barometer to see if this regional shift holds its momentum.
It is a highly complex, interconnected board, and the variables are constantly interacting in real time. And that is exactly why having access to tools like this is so vital for staying ahead of the curve.
Which is why you should check out Stylo News for yourself. It is available right now as both a mobile and a computer app.
It allows you, the individual user, to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs based on your specific interests. It pulls from hundreds of traditional news sources and synthesizing the noise into actionable intelligence.
Just like we did today, we highly encourage you to go to www.stylonews.com to subscribe for AI-powered news, completely on demand.
It really is an invaluable resource for remaining objectively informed in a noisy world. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the Western Hemisphere Situation Report.
We invite you to reach out and submit your requests for future global flashpoints. And please be sure to follow Stylo News on all your favorite social media platforms.
Before we go, my co-host has one final thought to mull over based on everything we have reviewed today.
Right. We spent this time talking about enforcing international borders, strengthening security alliances, and tracking national elections. But if illicit networks can effortlessly maneuver through engineered urban storm drains in Texas and instantly carve new land corridors through Central American jungles to bypass state militaries, well, are the traditional concepts of national borders already obsolete in the face of billion-dollar transnational logistics networks?
Something to think about.
Yeah.
Until next time.